It's a painting by David Brooke, and David Brooke, I had not heard of this artist until last week when I saw he had an exhibition at Danks Street Gallery Complex of works like this, and I was really struck by them when I saw them. I suppose they're quite similar to Tom Carmen's, aren't they, in that they have that sort of dappled brush stroke and a very strong sense of air and the light of the day. But they're an interesting bridge from Carmen, who is a plein air or outdoor artist, to some of the other artists in the show who are more studio-based, because they bring together that sense of freshness with a slightly more constructed and simplified compositional style. And they work beautifully from a long way away. They're very Bonnard-esque, Pierre Bonnard, the French painter. They have that sense of a sort of a woven tapestry-like fabric of paint. But when you come up to them, you see that sense of wholeness that has been achieved and of continuous flow between these brush strokes is one side of the painting. The other side is revealed when you come up and see how little patches have been adjusted to each other at the small scale. You probably can't see it if you're standing a long way away, but just in this little patch here, there's a whole little sequence of greens and blues that each seem to be adjusted in light of each other, so that each patch is satisfying unto itself as a sort of miniature composition. But then on stepping away, you still retain that sense of, well, when you get something else, you get the representation, you get the trees, the buildings, the landscape. And the same scale of mark all over is what binds the whole thing together, but it's not the same touch all over. It might be a similar sized brush, but sometimes he's moving in with the point, sometimes it's the flat or the side of the brush. And the really very exciting aspect of this painting is that white kind of underlay that is left through the trees and the background. And it's like a swathe from left to right that actually undoes the illusion of trees and buildings. But in undoing it, it actually adds something else, a sort of an abstractness that, I mean, I think that if the whites had been filled in the trees here and the buildings, it would not be such an interesting painting. And that brokenness of the representation in this area is really incredible. You have it's almost like I don't know, the negative shapes as we call them, the space between objects is painted in some instances, but there must have been a tree there or something and it's left just as a raw patch of canvas. So I started talking about, at the start of this talk, I was talking about deliberation on the one hand and then spontaneity on the other. And this artist, David Brooke, seems to me to have been able to get a really strong, intelligent mind for composition to work within an incredibly quick, well, reasonably quick and spontaneous flowing approach to painting, which is a really difficult thing to do. So it's, yeah, really, I think, a remarkable painting. And like a couple of other paintings in this exhibition, it's a young artist who I hadn't heard of before this, whose work is still very cheap. So you can make of that what you will. Okay, I'll move on now to a work that has been, I think, very popular, Seth Birchall's painting here. I say that it's been popular because I noticed that the packers picked it, and I just, in the time that I've been here today, in the last hour or so, I've seen a lot of people really stop and look at this painting. And again, it's a young artist who's probably 30-ish, I suppose. And I have to admit that my own approach to painting is not dissimilar to this, so I'm not surprised that I'm drawn to this. But the way that he's achieved this, I mean, it's an intriguing image on many levels. First of all, to pick a tree as a landscape moment and to focus on that so insistently, to place it in the middle of the picture, could be a disaster. It could just be very dull. To then simplify the tree to the extent that it almost seems like it could be a leaf or something. I mean, the scale of this image is really strange. You know that it's a tree because I suppose this roadway or path gives you a sense of scale. If you block that out, it could just as easily be a very large leaf or a leaf put on a table with a red and white checked tablecloth. You know, it really plays with the sense of scale of this object. And actually, it's just occurring to me as I look at it that the point of view on this tree, you would expect that if we're this far away from a tree like that, you'd actually be looking up at the foliage. But your eye level on this, what feels like quite large tree, is actually located dead centre, almost across this junction here. And that's another reason why it's quite disorienting, that you're not sure quite where you sit. And again, this is another way in which an artist brings us into their mind. One of the places, we can go anywhere in our mind. We can float above a subject, we can travel within, come out again. The Cubists painted that travelling through time that was a mental process. And in the same way, this painting takes us into a vantage point that doesn't really exist in real space and time. It's created through painting, and what it delivers us to is a sense of elevation and uplift that is, I think, why people probably like it. Not to mention the colours, which are sort of acidic and not exactly what you would call harmonious. The green is just a bit stronger than you would expect, and yet that's the force of the painting. That particular green set against an earth brown that just returns us to warmth. It's also a very bold decision to place such a strong tonal division right across the middle, but in fact that's the thing that relieves the centrality of the tree and brings that background into contact with the tree, thus making for a very tense space. So, I imagine this is a studio painting. I don't know what kind of work the artist Seth Birchall would do to, you know, in the way of sketches, or whether he works. It is a man, I think, isn't it? I think Seth is a man, yeah. Because it's quite a feminine painting too. It could be. Yeah. I'll leave that alone. But I don't know how he works, but it seems like a synthesized impression. You know, it really seems like something he's looked at in the studio over a while and pondered, and you can actually see the build-up of other layers that almost seem to be a different picture. Perhaps he is reusing a canvas from an old picture, but those little circles that are sort of built up with an impasted paint sort of show through and relate the air in this pink zone to this foreground. So even little things that would seem to be incidental in this painting are helping to weave the space together. And yeah. It's also, I also wonder about the crown of the tree. I mean, you can see that underneath this final layer of green is all kinds of dappling, and perhaps earlier on there were leaves, but he's really pushed this painting to arrive at a form where everything feels tensed and balanced. Just checking the title of this, it's